You're a vet. You got any questions before we kick off?
No, I'm totally fine.
Yeah, I figured. It's nice doing this with
You have like way nicer gear than we use, so it's funny. You got like the good stuff.
Well, at least I can look professional.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I just have like literally one ear pod hanging out of my ear the whole time.
Yeah.
I really like hearing myself like on a normal basis.
Well, and I think you got to go one way or the other. When I'm by myself, well, that's not true. I do use headphones because I have a tendency, I'll either get really loud because I get excited and I become a loud talker, or I'll like not pay attention and then all of a sudden I'm like
drift
over here a little bit.
Yeah.
So if I'm by myself, but I record a shit ton of YouTube videos.
Right.
And I normally just use the lapel mic.
I'm used to looking at like the split screen of all three of us on the screen, right?
Yeah.
So you're like staring, is my head crooked? You know, you're like correcting.
Yeah, totally. I like to try and do them in person, and when I can, I've probably only done a half a dozen. But now that the fucking COVID shit is chilling out, you know what I mean? Like, I think an in-person conversation is more dynamic. You can feed off of each other a little bit.
Yeah, a little more natural.
Awkward pauses, that type of thing.
You don't get a Wi-Fi 5-second delay.
Suddenly. That's the other thing, man. I've done a couple big interviews, and I could hear this like popping and hissing, and you're like, well, I'm just gonna fucking push through. Hopefully we can salvage this thing in post, man.
I know.
Yeah.
A few disasters. I mean, there's some podcasts that are getting lots of views that are still on like the very early stages of like they haven't bought anything.
Nothing.
Like they're still almost, it's like a joke at this point. And they're like, I guess we should get some cameras. We're getting, 50,000 views an episode or something. It's funny. So whatever Lots is and whatever world they're in,
Yeah, exactly.
Because right now, like the value out of the podcast that I do for me,
you're right,
out of It's Just Bodybuilding.
Yeah.
The value there is I get an endless amount of like, good clients that are my style of client that have like that same vibe that I kind of like to work with, and sort of like feeds me an exact target market of client.
Right.
Which is awesome.
It's perfect.
Instead of getting like, like a lot of, just think of the, people out there that, they want to train a certain type of client, but they're getting like this wide spectrum and they just kind of have to deal with all these other clients, Yeah. So it's nice. I get like my exact hardcore, super serious client just spoon fed right there through the podcast. And it's awesome because they already have a really good idea of what type of person you are. So there's a whole bunch of warm up stuff that they're not going to have to go through. So it's good for them.
Yeah.
Because they kind of know who they're dealing with.
Yeah, man. It's like the dating period's almost over. Like you know who the person is and you know what you're getting. And if they've contacted you at that point, they understand what they're in for.
Yeah. And when they say, I listen to the show all the time, I'm like, oh, well, I know that you now know all these other things that are going to make this a little easier and faster. And, so it's cool. So since we have that, I guess there's lots of other people that they're not getting clients.
Right.
So monetizing their podcast would be of utmost importance.
Yep.
But for us, it enables us to kind of hold out a bit.
Yeah.
We don't have to rush into, reading ads for things that maybe don't really care about.
Yep. No, it's the same boat I'm in where it's like, I don't need this to generate income for me. I have a long-term plan and this kind of cool Kickstarter thing I'll tell you about later on that I'm kind of working on. But I'm in the same thing where I've been approached by a couple different brands. I'm just like, that's not
right.
And part of me with the whole unbiased review thing, like I think in bodybuilding, there's this acceptance that, you're with Mutant. So, you're not going to be doing reviews of other supplement companies.
Right. There's an understanding.
We know you're going to be pro Mutant, even if every product's not the best one on the shelf. You work for the company, you support the company's a good company. And I think people understand that's how bodybuilders are able to do what bodybuilders do kind of pre-social media. And I think there's an acceptance of that.
Yeah, and people understand the market is a little different. Like, there's really only a couple factories in the world that make creatine.
Yeah, right.
So everyone's creatine kind of
creatine.
Comes from the same place. It's does the company have integrity? Are they, and
does it have engagement?
Is
like
it to
you guys have
label?
been sponsoring the shit out of shows lately.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is we want to be seen as a bodybuilding brand that supports bodybuilding and puts money into bodybuilders' pockets.
Yeah.
So for example, when we sponsored the Arnold Classic this year, like Jim, the owner, he was really proud that technically some of our money
Yep.
went into Brandon Curry's pocket.
Yep.
Just a little bit. Like, like that big check he gets,
Yep.
That's where that money comes from.
100%.
And so that makes him feel good, like
Yep.
we're contributing, we're giving back to these, not just the grassroots people, obviously at the entry level shows, which is great, the prize bags and all that stuff, but right to the top,
Yeah.
It's not just about marketing the brand. It's
Yeah.
about like showing the industry that you want to be a part of like that.
Yeah.
So it's a cool way to look at it.
All right, welcome back to the Mindful Hunter podcast. I'm your host as always, Jay Nichol. Special guest this week, Big Wrong Partlow, good friend, owner of West Coast Iron, host of It's Just Bodybuilding, and IFBB professional bodybuilder.
Washed up, broken, retired IFBB pro. Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, I've sort of found myself in a position where I sort of make a living by talking.
Right.
And it's sort of part of what I do. And I just kind of do as much of it as I can. And it seems to lead to more opportunities and open more doors and, brings more people into my world as well. And who knows, maybe someone will accidentally get fit by watching this, Jay.
Yeah, you never know.
Well,
and that's the funny thing, because a lot of people would say, like, it's a hunting podcast. What are you doing having a professional bodybuilder on? But everybody knows I'm prepping for my first show. Just
Right.
broke the 5-week mark, 4.5 weeks to go. I do a shitload of nutrition. Oh, yeah. We can use whatever words you want on this podcast.
Yeah. No worries.
We're not
no worries.
filtered. We get the little E.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. And I cover a lot of my own kind of bodybuilding journey. And it was always in the back of my head that when I got a little closer, I wanted to have some people from the industry on to kind of give a more experienced insight into what that is. And it was funny because we were in the back office the other day and you asked me, has there been any direct crossover or has there been any, similarities between like what you do in the backcountry and this prep that you're going through?
Right.
And at first I hadn't really thought about it, but I've been thinking about it more and more lately. And there's a lot. And that's kind of what I want to pick your brain about today, is kind of like the psychology of bodybuilding, because I think there's this kind of isolated element. Like bodybuilding is a very solitary, selfish endeavor. Mm-hmm. I think hunting in the backcountry is the same way. It's not a team sport for most people.
Right.
And there's a lot of, people are always asking me, what's the perfect pair of boots? What's the perfect tent? And I'm always like, it's not going to be your boots or tent that's going to send you home. It's going to be your mind, because your mind's going to break. And you're going to come up with these really good reasons why it's okay to quit. And it's not going to occur to you until 2 weeks later that you quit. And then you're going to get this like kind of burning acid sensation in the back of your throat. And you're going to realize, I fucking quit.
Yeah.
And where that battle starts to become lost is in the mind. And I find prep very similar. But anyways, I want to back all the way up, because the other thing that I find very kind of admirable or inspirational about you is that I almost think of you as like the blue collar bodybuilder. Like you were not a guy who had it easy. You didn't have, I was trying to think of it the other day and I'm like, I bet you Ron has like top 5% genetics. I think Olympians might have like top 1%.
Sort of like the podcast numbers we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Top 5% in the world is unbelievable.
Elite.
But
by far.
You're
but
a
it's
shit
not
pro.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is, I'd like your opinion on this too. And let's just dive into this. Do you think genetics play a role in work ethic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Because I like to remind people that your genetics are also what your brain is built on, your brain chemistry. Some people have those fucking wires for certain things, and some people don't have wires for those things. And that is just as important as whether you have 5 million muscle cells in your biceps or 2 million muscle cells in your biceps.
Yep.
Because when you're born, that's the number of muscle cells you get.
Yep.
And it's real nice to have a whole bunch of muscle cells everywhere that you can train and get to grow. But, some people, we know who they are too.
100%.
That have those wires. And obviously, the nature nurture argument is in there. We can go like, that's a whole nother rabbit's hole for elite athletes but there's obviously, heavy genetics involved in mindset and brain chemistry.
Well, and we
You
see
know,
those
some people
pros
get
that
lucky.
have all the ingredients and they just never
Yeah.
put that package together.
Yeah.
And you see them train and you see them diet and you're like, is this guy really pushing themselves? And I find people have a tendency to take more credit for the psychological than they should and less credit for the physical than they should, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely true.
People want to say like self-determination and self-will. I'm responsible for the work that I put in. The body, I just got it. And it's either going to be a good body or another body. And I almost
Right.
think it's too heavily skewed in both directions. I think we have a little bit more control over our physique than we think we do.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit less control over our willpower and work ethic than we think we do.
Yeah, and then we could go down the whole like, is there such thing as free will?
Well, right?
Right, and then you're all the way back to the
Yeah.
free will argument, and did you even decide to be a bodybuilder?
Yeah.
So it's
shit
I
gets
know.
deep real fast.
Yeah, it's fascinating, but you're right about the wiring, and you're right about the quitting, and it's funny because I see parallels in everything that I tend to choose to do as a hobby tends to be isolationist,
Right.
repetitive,
Yeah.
tedious, and requires a ton of time to even see progress.
Yeah.
I don't know why I picked those hobbies. Playing guitar,
Yeah.
riding my BMX bike. All those hobbies are just like repetitive.
Well, and it's the same thing you're talking about on your podcast is the reps.
Yeah, the reps.
No
That's
matter
what it's
what
all.
it
and
is,
I don't know why my brain
You got to put in.
always like to
the
do
reps.
those things that require reps,
Yeah.
But maybe everything does. I guess that's the secret.
So let's back up a little bit. Farm kid from north of Edmonton, correct?
Grand Prairie, Alberta. Yeah. So
Okay.
5 hours north of Edmonton. Yeah.
I spent some time in Grand Prairie. I used to be a tree planter.
Oh, really?
Got in
Yeah.
a couple fights. What's
Oh,
that?
yeah.
The GPI is where we used to stay, and then there's that shit kicker bar across the road from the GPI.
Oh, God.
What the fuck is it called?
I mean, it could have been a million things.
Yeah, it's probably changed
all
names.
those
And
bars.
this was a long time ago.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I'm in my 40s now. I was in my early 20s, so this would have been 20 years ago that I was there. But
Was
yeah,
it?
spent a few seasons in Grand Prairie.
Yeah,
It's
I know
something
exactly
else.
where you would have been. Yeah.
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 So what was the first inspiration? Was it a magazine? Did you see a cover? Like what was the I want to look like that moment for you?
So I always tell the story as I'm watching the late movie with my dad
Yes.
on like a Saturday night, and I would have been 13, and Conan the Barbarian came on.
Yeah.
So I always tell that story.
Lamentations of the Women.
Yeah, yeah, and I see him pushing the wheel of pain, and he grows into the
Yeah.
big muscly adult slave, and I remember after he's full grown, and you see Arnold in the movie, I remember saying to my dad, I want to look like that. And my dad goes, that guy must be 240 pounds. It would take you 10 years to look like that. And I said, okay, well, I better get started.
Little prophetic statement.
Yeah, and he was like, yeah, you'd have to get started right now, I guess. My dad's like that, just very matter of fact. And there was some weights in the basement.
Okay.
And there was like
the York concrete.
yeah, the old
filled
York
ones?
concrete
Yep,
filled, just
yep.
110 pounds probably worth of weights. And I don't know why I knew what exercises to do, but I understood that like bent rows, bench press, squats, overhead press, like that's what I was doing with this barbell. I don't know why I knew that. I must have seen one of those charts at some point. And I was very athletic. Like I'd been in Taekwondo for years. I was a blue belt. So I was very physically coordinated, and I was riding BMX bikes, and I was skiing freestyle.
Okay.
Right. I was very athletic. And I just figured out how to just work the body a few times a week is all I really knew. And then when I turned 14, I was able to join the gym because that was the age limit.
Okay.
So I went and joined World Gym in Grand Prairie, Alberta. And yeah, that was it. And I remember the first day at the gym, I saw guys that were like bodybuilders.
Right. And this would have, give us a date, like this would have been heyday. We're
April,
early 90s?
My first day at the gym was April 28th, 1990.
Okay.
I remember it. And I was 137 pounds on the scale. And it was the end of grade 9, like near the end of grade 9. So yeah, I was just a kid. But I remember there was a guy riding the bike, and he had like a cut off hoodie, like where it was cut off at the elbow.
Yeah.
Right. So you couldn't see his body, but you could just see his forearms and his face. And he had his hood up, and he was riding the bike. And I remember his forearms were just covered in veins, and they were super muscular.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, oh man, look at the guy's arms. And I remember someone said, oh, that's Norm. He's gonna win the Albertas this year or whatever, whatever show it was.
Yeah.
And that's when I first that would have been the door opening to like, oh, there's like a series of shows that happen every year.
Okay.
Right. Like that whole awareness of all of a sudden, oh, there's a show called the Albertas.
Right.
And it's prestigious. And if you win it, you get to be king of the gym.
Yeah.
What's this concept?
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, that went off. And I was already reading muscle mags and everything. So I was like, I knew about the pros, but I just hadn't put it together. You're just a kid.
Sure.
And you're like, oh, that's how it works, eh? You work your way up.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing like the kind of the fat dad power lifters that are like, they're really like even back in 1990, like got the shirts that say all natty, and the chalk on the back and they're squatting and they're strong, like I remember those guys in the gym too. They were awesome. Like it was just a bunch of characters and you mentioned blue collar and that would have been like, it was like for a small town gym, it was pretty like hardcore.
Yeah.
Like I look back and I was pretty lucky. There was like, bodybuilders in there that were benching 3 plates and squatting 5 plates and power lifters and chalk. And they had like, the 5-disc CD shuffle going with some AC/DC and some, Metallica on there. Like I was pretty lucky to grow up in that gym.
Yeah.
Most kids were shoved in a rec center or a YMCA or a high school gym. And I got to train there. It was like, I'm sure it ruined me for many years to come. A lot of influences there. Some crazy characters. You meet the guys that own the bars and all the doormen, and you meet the cops, and you meet the guys that aren't the cops, the opposite of the cops, right? And you see some strippers training there, and it just opened my eyes to like this whole world. It was this grade 9 kid, and I'm in this like very mixed gym that was like just the craziest spectrum of people I'd ever run into.
So when did it become something that you knew you wanted to do with your life? Like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. I just remember that like training was like my number one, like it was my thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'd ever really put any like, thought into being a pro bodybuilder until I did my first show in 97.
Okay.
So I competed at the Northern Albertas. And I won the heavy.
21, 22.
I was 21,
for 7 years.
I was 21, yeah. And I did my first show, and I won the heavyweights, and I didn't win the overall, the middleweight.
Now, back then, were there 3 tiers?
It was Northerns and Southerns.
Okay.
And then you would go from there, whichever one you did. You would go to provincials.
Okay.
And then from there, you would go to nationals.
Okay.
So that's how.
And there would be a pro card at nationals.
Yeah, one pro card.
Yep.
For the overall winner only. Yeah. So it was like really tough back then to turn pro.
Yeah.
So I remember winning the Northerns and then like 2 years later at 99, I went in and I smoked the Albertas and won the overall. And I remember when I won that show.
And you're a big dude for a bodybuilder.
Yeah, I'm 6'1". Well, I'm a little shorter now in my old age,
We're all shrinking a bit, bro.
But I was 6 foot half inch, I guess, which is technically, if you're over 6 foot, your odds of turning pro are like statistically much smaller.
Oh, I bet.
Like they
People see these dudes, man, and it's like, like a lot of those guys are like
5'8".
Like, what's Walker? 5'7"?
5'7", yeah.
Yeah, the dude looks like a freak, but he's like kind of a midget as well. You know what
Cutler,
I mean? Like,
5'9", 5'10", Lavroni, all those guys, 5'10", that's
even
about it.
Coleman wasn't even 6, right?
No,
5'10", maybe?
5'10", yeah. Most of those guys. So yeah, and I guess after I won the Albertas, I had some people that were like, you can be a pro.
Right.
They were like starting to say that to me, like, you're gonna do, like, when you go into nationals.
And how big? What would have been your stage weight back then?
244 when I won the Albertas.
Okay.
Yeah, I was big. I didn't realize it. I didn't realize because I had been training with guys that were much better than me. Like my training partner, I'd lived in Australia already for a year, and my training partner there was a national champion, super heavyweight. He was like 270 on, big 275 pounder.
Yep.
And my other training partner won his class at the Worlds, and I'd been surrounded by these good bodybuilders, and I was looking at all the pros my height, and they were all 265 on stage, like Paul Dillett, and Gunter Schreeler Camp, and guys like that. So I thought, well, I'm only 240 on stage.
Yeah.
It's not that big, 240, 245. I got to get way bigger to deal with these guys. But then when I showed up at the Albertas at that size.
Monster.
I didn't realize. I was expecting like 20 other guys to be as big as me, right?
Yeah.
then that's when everyone was like, I was only 23, and everyone was like, fuck, there's not a lot of 23-year-olds that look like you, dude. Like, this is a long time ago. There's a bunch of them now.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of kids now that are freaks. But back then I was like kind of rare, there wasn't a lot of kids that were doing what I was doing as seriously as I was. So,
and before this, we were talking about West Coast Iron, the gym that you own, and some of the things that I like about West Coast Iron. And that's one of the things I like to play psychological games. When I'm big, I like to feel small. And when I'm small and ripped, I like to feel big and fat. Like whatever I am trying to be, I want to trick myself into I'm the other.
Right.
So that I work harder. And like, I'm not a small dude, but at West Coast Iron, I don't stand out in any way, shape, or form. When I go to another like normie gym, if I take my shirt off or wear a tank top, like I just got back from a week in Arizona.
Right.
And like, you go to the hotel gym and everybody's like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, there's some freak in the gym.
Yeah. Whereas like West Coast, it's nothing. You know what I mean? And I like feeling like that because it keeps me motivated. And I think it keeps your self-perception right-sized. And if anything, a little bit on the safe side.
Right. I don't know. I guess also the fish tank thing, know, like if you think you're the biggest, then
why would you work harder?
I don't know. Do you get bigger? I don't know. Like
100%.
And then, all the questions about, even if you do the effort, if the mind doesn't want it, does it happen? All those questions. I was like desperate to be a pro. Like I remember just being, and that was another thing was I think I got big young because I was completely ignoring everyone at the amateur level.
Right.
I was only looking at the pros that were my height.
Yep.
That was my framing.
Yep.
I'm 6'1", who's 6'1"? Paul Dillett, Gunter Schreler Camp. Okay, that's what I have to look like.
Yep.
So I wasn't looking at the other guys in the gym and going, oh, I got to beat that guy.
Right.
I was like way past that in my thought. I was like, I got to be 265 on stage. Like I have to be so big, it's crazy. Like I have to eat my way up to like 320 to be 265 on stage. Like, it's going to take a long time. So I knew it was going to take a long time. I knew it was going to be this huge task. I didn't have this short timeline in my head like I see a lot of the young guys now.
Yeah.
Saying they're going to be pro in 2 years and stuff. And it's really different now. I knew it was going to be like this huge investment.
I think too, like the one thing, like I have people hitting me up now because I'm starting to get leaner and look better. And everybody's like, how did that happen? And I'm like, you got to understand, I felt like a fat piece of shit for 3 straight years.
To get huge.
Literally.
Yeah, I know.
Like I felt terrible. I felt bloated. And people don't know you're a lifter. They just think you're a chubby guy. Like I'm on Zoom meetings for work and I got the D-ball face and it's just like, I just look like a balloon. And everybody just thinks I'm fat and lazy. And you just gotta be, and let's like, then think that.
Right.
I don't care what you think. And if I could give anything to some of the young kids these days, it's like, stop giving a shit about what people think every day because you're never going to transform yourself without that period of like, check out. That's where all the progress is really made.
Yeah.
Like anything that comes out of this now has not been made in the last 3 months.
Right.
I'm just removing all the garbage on top of what was made over the last 3 years.
It takes a long time to build a lot of muscle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, I see a lot of people now, I think they compete too often.
Yep.
I think they compete.
I think Regan is a perfect example. Like, I'd love to see that guy sit out for 2 years. Like, it's been the same Regan the last 3 years in a row. Like, stop. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, go take a couple off seasons, man.
Take
or like a
your time.
2-year off season. Go build the foundation. Because he's another guy whose genetics are insane.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
you see it. You know what I mean? Like, I believe that too. And the problem is, we live in a society that rewards competition. Like nobody gives a shit about your Instagram when you're bulking.
No, and that's a problem with, people got to pay their bills too.
Yeah.
So, but it's the younger bodybuilders now are there's a lot of great ones. I don't want to bag on the new school of people coming up. There's a lot of great young bodybuilders coming up, but generally a tendency tends to be competing really early on. Like I trained for 7 years.
Yeah.
I was 265 pounds when I started my first diet. Like I got like up there,
Yeah.
So that was just, I didn't want to diet down and be a 6 foot tall middleweight,
Yeah.
I knew that would be pointless for me. So I just took my time and, the competing was secondary to what I wanted to build. The competition wasn't the goal. It was like, okay, it's time to measure myself now, see where I'm at. And that's when I started.
Yeah. It was funny because we were talking about this before the podcast as well. My first real coach I ever had was Ditto. And I've been lifting since I was in my early 20s and like used to get all the magazines and like follow the Olympia and all that kind of stuff. But I will say there was a couple like fundamental principles that I just don't think I grasped until I actually, like the level of which I thought life was recomp all the time. Like if I just, did this main gaining thing that Duzette talks about, and if I just ate a little bit over, I could just slowly get bigger and bigger. And I'm not going to say that doesn't work, but I firmly believe, based on my experience that I've had now of doing something for 20 years one way and then doing it for 3 years the other, if you want to transform who you are, it takes serious commitment and a shitload of calories. And I remember when I called Ditto, I was like, I'd like to do a competition next year. And he's like, okay, let's work towards it. And it was funny how every 6 months would go by and next year turned into next year because I kept seeing the progress, and I realized if I'm going to do this, I don't want to step. We've all seen those guys that it's like, you shouldn't be on stage, bro.
Let's really accumulate something here.
If we're going to do it, let's do it right and have an actual package. Yeah. And again, I'm 6'1" as well. Like it's kind of a gift and a curse because at least you have the frame to fill out, whereas the short guys can't get any taller.
Right.
Like once they hit their peak, that's it. They're done.
Yeah.
So it does give you a longer runway, but it's also like a guy who's 5'6" or 5'7" can go lift for, 12, 18 months and put together a pretty decent package. I don't think it's like that at over 6
definitely
foot.
not. It's funny. People have asked me, do you wish you were shorter? And the answer is always no.
Right.
Because, post bodybuilding now, I would never want to be over. I would never want to not be 6 feet tall. No. It's like I've always seen the world from this perspective. I like it. It's good.
Yeah,
it's fun.
100%.
I'm more likely to become president. Apparently.
Yeah. That's a fact, man. So talk to me a little bit about the transition into bodybuilding as a career, because that's something I think you've done somewhat like non-traditionally in a way.
Right. I never really thought about it.
Okay.
I just always did what I loved to do.
Right.
And then, financial opportunities eventually just came through those avenues, so I just kept grinding away, trying to win nationals. My goal wasn't to get sponsored. My goal was to win nationals. A sponsor would be nice. It's nice to get free protein from these guys or those guys or whoever was giving me protein at the time. But then eventually, a mutant came along and was like, we want to sign you to a proper contract, and we want to,
And were you even a pro when Mutant first?
No,
you weren't.
I was still an amateur.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they recognized they wanted to give the amateurs that they paid they wanted to give them some money. They wanted to treat them like professionals and then use their personalities more on video because YouTube and all that was growing.
Yep.
And so they had a different view of, most companies, amateurs don't get money. They won't give you nothing, right? But Mutant was like, you know what? We're going to pay you something because, we're going to start flying you out here to shoot YouTube content. We're going to start doing this. And, they saw the value in having, even though I was an amateur, everyone in Canada knew me.
Right.
So they were like, well, we can use you in Canada extensively, and everybody, and we can fly you to shows and
it's pretty progressive because the biggest influencers in the world today aren't
right.
Like Callum Von Moger would pick Nick Walker to shame.
Right.
I guess he's a pro, so he doesn't count. But there's a ton of dudes these days who aren't pros in any way, shape, or form, but are still very successful marketers,
right?
Which is essentially what it all comes down to.
Well, also remember that right after they had got me up and running and sponsored and stuff, that was when they decided to sign Rich Piana,
right?
Who was the ultimate non-professional.
Perfect example.
Right. So they were just trying to save money.
Yeah.
They were just trying to get, let's get guys with really good personalities that people know. And everyone in California knew Rich because he was like a Venice staple.
Yeah.
And they were going into the U.S. market through California.
Okay.
So that was the purpose of signing Rich.
Right.
Was use Rich. Everyone in California knows him. That's our entry point.
He's perfectly on brand for Mutant. The guy's a freak.
He wasn't a pro, so he was cheap.
Yeah.
And he was retired, so he was easygoing and could fly anywhere and didn't care about He wasn't all like, I need my meals shipped or anything.
Well, and a bit of a rebirth for him, no?
Yeah, and
like he was kind of on the downhill.
He was happy to be involved.
Right.
He was happy to be getting paid to work with a company that was kind of fun. That's as much thought as he put into it at the time. He was like, oh, this will be a lot of fun. This company's cool. These guys are nice. They actually have good products and they care and they make all their own shit. Right. And Rich was cool about everything. So that just shows how they were thinking. So I got on with them like that and they were paying me a bit of money. I think I was getting like, I was full time with clients at the time, but they started giving me like an extra $500 a month or something, right? And I was like, oh, sweet,
yeah,
$500 plus subs, plus they fly me around when they need me.
Yep.
And then that goes up, and then eventually it goes up again, and next thing you know, you're really getting paid pretty good and then I turned pro, and then it just kept going from there. So, and then the clients, and then the gym, and now the podcast, and just trying to, reach into the industry in as many ways as I can to contribute. And also because, I also like to make a living from what I love to do. So it's really cool that I get all these, multiple income streams through the fitness industry. The fitness industry is so many things.
Yeah.
Like it's a giant world. There's so many ways you can get involved in the business of it and do your thing. I think of guys that are like at the Olympia level that don't have contracts.
Right.
And so I'm really fortunate to still be working with the company after all these years.
Well, and you went internal as well, right? Like you were doing athlete management for a while.
Yeah, I went and worked for them for a while. Yeah. And then when the gym started, this is before we opened the gym, I started working for them. And then
that brought you out here
to first.
You just started training. Is that back when it was X Club or Club X?
Yeah,
or whatever
it was X Club Fitness.
Okay.
I just started training there and working for Mutant.
Yep.
And a couple years into being out here and working for Mutant, we opened the gym.
How'd you guys all get to know each other? That's something I've always been curious about. For people who are curious, there was a bigger group of guys, but now there's 3 core owners.
Yeah, there's 3 of us now. There was 5, and a couple guys sold out their shares and moved on, and now there's 3. And it's just been, we all just kind of knew each other from training at that gym.
Okay.
And when the gym closed, we were like, well, I said to a few guys, I don't want to have to drive anywhere else to train. All the gyms suck around here. And so the word just kind of went around between a few of us, let's get this room and reopen it as a new gym and see what we can do. And eventually it just kind of, I remember we all just met for lunch one day, and it was the group of us, and that was it. We were the ones that were in, and that's how it started. It was just out of desperation of not wanting to train anywhere else.
Yeah.
It was 2016. So I wasn't totally sure if I was done competing or not.
Okay.
I thought I might want to compete again.
This is pre-quad tear?
It was post-quad tear.
Okay.
Yeah, but I still thought I might rehab again.
Okay.
Sorry, 2017. This is 2017. Okay. And I still thought I might have another show under my belt. So part of the motivation that I was telling myself at the time was that I needed a gym to really go nuts at. Right. And then, as the gym got busier, my girlfriend started to make comments that, I don't know if you need to compete again.
Right.
Like you seem really, really happy.
Yeah.
Like you're taking your energy and you're smashing it into this gym, and it's like
still training like a savage.
And you
still loving what you do.
seem to be super happy, I don't know. And then I started to realize, I was like, I've sort of moved past what I have to do as a competitor. I was 40 by that point. So I just didn't, I was like, I've done so much. I already did 24 shows at that point. I was
That's crazy.
I was like, let's just call it a day, And as soon as I did that, I just felt this, like this huge weight of the world just released. As soon as I started telling people I was retired, I was like, I'm not going to compete again. No more competitions for me. I started saying that, and I was like, wow, I feel great.
Yeah.
Because I did it for a long time,
So let's talk about that a little bit, because the fascinating thing for me, like I've always been fascinated with the physiques. I've always been like in awe or inspired by, bodybuilding physiques. But the thing that really, really captured my attention was like the amount of discipline and the kind of psychological suffering that it required to go through a prep. And maybe people oversell that a little bit. I don't know.
No, it's tough.
And I can just say from my own limited experience, just this being my first one, it is a different type of And I'm drawn to that shit. Like,
Yeah.
I'm prepping for a 15-day solo sheep hunt that I'm going to get dropped off by a plane and I won't see another living being for 15 days for the first 2 weeks of August. Like, that's my idea of a good time.
Yeah. See, that to me, okay.
Yeah.
I digress.
Yeah. But talk to me about, and maybe go back to your first one. Like, did you know what you were expecting? How did you approach that kind of mental side of the game?
Well, I was really well read. Like, I didn't jump into my first prep like with any surprises, really.
Gotcha.
I knew I'd already trained with, like I said, I'd previously had training partners that had won like world titles and national titles and pro cards and stuff. So I'd already trained with them while they suffered.
You came up in the glory days of conditioning. Like,
yeah.
arguably
Like
that kind of like mid to late 90s,
right.
Early 2000s.
Yeah, your face better
like
be completely gone. You better look like you have advanced AIDS.
Yes.
Yeah, because if 100%. You're not fucking peeled, you're like, even the guys that were 10th place in the light heavyweights would have striated glutes.
Yep.
Everyone was ripped. And everyone over dieted essentially in that period of time. Everyone was just peeled.
That was the look.
Peeled at all costs, And so I'd seen their faces suck in, and I'd seen them sit on the bench between sets like, I don't know if I have another set of me. And I'd seen them go through all that. I'd been to their house while we were having our pre-workout coffee, and I'd seen them eat their like plate of egg whites with no carbs, and then like help them into the car for the ride to the gym. Like, I'd been through that with a couple of my training partners at a young age.
Okay.
So I was waiting for that stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, let's go. Like, I knew it was coming. I'd already been very fortunate to like sit and talk with pro Olympian level guys.
Yeah.
I had a few drinks with Sonny Schmidt one night and like talked to him about doing the Olympia. And I'd already met Dorian Yates, and I'd already met like a bunch of the guys in the 90s at seminars and heard crazy stories and heard them talk about their preps. And so I was very fortunate. I feel like a lot of people nowadays, like, they're like, hey, I'm doing my first show. Maybe I should go to a show.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, you should. Because when I did my first show, I'd already been to the Nationals in Canada, the Nationals in Australia, and the Nationals in New Zealand, technically, because I was traveling when I was younger, and I'd been to a bunch of shows. And I'd been to like several provincial and state level shows. I'd already seen a whole bunch of stuff. I'd seen pro cards handed out, that sort of thing. So
right.
I think that's really helpful. But yeah, I didn't really have any surprises. I was ready to go. And maybe that helped me kind of launch early and win my first, I did really well early and got to nationals really quickly. So it's probably part of it.
One of the things I see online is there seems to be like two approaches to prep. One is like, bring the pain.
Right.
The second is like, how can we avoid the pain through like tips and tricks and hacks?
Right.
And I think, somebody once told me that pain doesn't come from change. Pain comes from the resistance to change. And I think that when you give into it, there's almost like this acceptance that like we were joking around at the gym, yesterday. And I was like, I've been on 65 grams of carbs for the last 8 weeks. Like,
yeah.
What else
I
you
don't
got?
even care. Yeah.
You
I don't
like
care.
Bring it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like there's any other place. Like, it can't get any worse than it is right now. But I do feel like there's this one mindset about how can we trick it? Do you know what I mean? Like, how can I sidestep that suffering and pain?
I think that's our natural tendency to assume like hacks are great. Right. So there's like a middle ground.
Sure.
But we see that a couple of hacks do work and they are helpful. And so our tendency is to search for like a life just completely padded by them.
Right.
So that's exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, you have to be prepared. Like if you really want to get in shape, it might happen easy for you.
Right.
Like I've seen preps. I've had preps where I was like pretty surprised at how much food I was eating, and I was getting leaner every week, and like, just let's not change anything. Wow, the body's really flying. Like, I always say every time you do a show, it's like you're paddling a boat to an island. So your starting point, and your goal point, but you don't know which way the water's flowing. Like you don't know the current.
Yeah.
You might have a storm.
Yeah.
Like you might find the boat goes way out over here and you have to paddle it back, but you get there.
Yeah.
And then the next time you go, it might just be smooth. You might just paddle lightly and the wind blows you all the way to the island and you land right where you wanted.
That's a great analogy.
And when you do enough shows, you see that that's how the reality of life is.
Right.
But you better not get in that boat and not be prepared for the bad trip, right? You better not expect it to be easy. So that's the mental position you have to be in, is you have to be like, this could be like, I have to be prepared to do what I have to do. And what you might have to do is 50 grams of carbs and an hour and a half of cardio every day and slug it out for weeks and just force the body to drop the last bit and all that stuff, you know?
What do you see as far as the differential between clients? Because I see all these people online talking about, oh, my coach is my psychologist and all this shit. And it's like, my emails to Dom are like a matter of letters. Like there's no, like, I don't call Dom. We don't chat on WhatsApp. It's literally like, right now I do pictures Wednesday and Sunday or more often if he wants them. And I have like 5 questions that get 1-word answers.
Right.
And he sends back the diet. And like, that's my relationship. And I kind of I don't view anything else as his responsibility, but I'm also 43 years old and I get it.
That's exactly it.
So do you see, are there people on that other that require more, I don't want to use a term with negative connotations, but just maybe more energy or more understanding or more compassion, and there's more of that like coaching element as opposed to just the strategic laying out of the plan.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, a certain number of those people are going to gravitate to certain coaches.
Right.
You know, but I mean, you're still going to get a mix of them yourself, you know? Yeah. And I have some that are, I guess, much more high maintenance. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing.
Those dudes that have like 300 bikini clients.
Yeah.
And I'm like, their WhatsApp must be insane.
Well, so yeah. So the thing with those guys, and, you know, I'm not naming any names, so it's all good. But there's a lot of trainers out there that they're not personal to their clients at all. They're sending just copycat. Okay, it's week 6, so we're going to switch to this cardio, and this is your new supplement plan because it's week 6. It has nothing to do with who you are or even how you look. Right. It's just week 6, and you're part of my bikini team for this show, and I have 40 of you, and you're all doing this. And some of you are going to be in really good shape,
and some aren't.
And some aren't going to quite get there, but that's okay. You're just all
it's a numbers game.
It's a numbers game.
I'm going to end up with a couple.
I'm going to probably get a pro card out of this because I got 40 girls going in, and let's just do it. Yeah. So that's how a lot of those coaches work. Yeah. But, you know, it doesn't mean that like clients like you, that's how my brain initially works.
Right.
That's my default. How's your strength?
Yep.
What's your workout quality?
Yep.
Are you starving to death? Right. Are you an 8 or a 9 out of 10 on the hunger scale? And don't say 10 because 10 is no one gets to 10. And so like, just where are you on these scales? How are you doing? And have your pictures shown progress? And that's all I really initially need to know. Right. You know, but you know, I also like to, I mean, I also, you know, I banter with my clients a bit because that's just the type of guy I am. You know, some of them might be into something I'm also into. So, you know, I'll make them laugh or something like that because I like to have fun with people. And sometimes I do tell people like, you know, I like to keep things light. I like to joke around. I have a lot of experience working with Chris Aceto. Yeah. And he made competing fun at the end for me when it was almost not fun anymore. And I started
Who's a
working
legend,
with Chris.
By the way, for people listening to the podcast, who's like
the
literally
technician.
There's maybe 5 guys on the planet who are coaches at Chris's level.
Right. He's the technician. Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to become one of his friends, and we were actually became friends first, and then I hired him. I remember when I asked him if he'd help me, he was like, I've been waiting for you to ask for years. He's like, so we worked together, and he said one thing. I remember he said, so he goes, one thing, you're paying me, the diet's free, you're paying me for the jokes. And I never forgot that. And I always remembered, like, this is a guy who does like Olympia level people. Yeah. And that's how he treats it. And I said, well, you know, how do you decide who to take? And he goes, because he's got all that real estate. He's got plenty of money.
He doesn't need this shit.
He doesn't need this shit. He doesn't
Nope.
need this shit. But he's like, I work with people that are fun to work with. That's my only rule. Are you fun?
Yeah.
If you're no fun, I can't handle it. And you look at all the guys you worked with, like Roden and Luke and all those characters, Jose and Dusty and like just everyone, all those guys, they love bodybuilding and it's fun for them.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about this, even though you're going down this road of pain and there's all this like hard cardio ahead and sacrifice and you're not going to be having cake and all that stuff, there's something about it that at the end of the day, you're like, most other people can't do this.
Yeah.
And there's something satisfying about that. Like when you go on your 15-day sheep hunt, how many times does it occur to you on that trip that most people can't do what you're
100%,
doing?
man.
It's like, this is special to me because I'm testing myself in a way that most people can't even begin.
No, you get that sense that you belong to an elite group. Even getting this as far, and I'm more shredded now than I've ever been, even remotely closely.
Right.
If I broke a leg tomorrow,
and couldn't do the show,
I would know. And I do know for a fact I have this in me now, whereas I did not know that before.
That's something.
Yeah.
You find out something's in you.
Yeah. And I think when that awareness kind of awakens, that changes people, man.
Yeah.
Like, and for the better, you know what I mean? Because I've always had this theory that like, we have a believed ceiling of our own limitations.
Yes.
And that self-esteem is actually acquired through violating those beliefs. Like you're forced into a situation where you accomplish something you thought you were incapable of. And that forces you to recognize, oh, that belief was false. And then you question, well, if that belief is false, what other beliefs are false? And what other like kind of limiting factors am I imposing on myself? And like true power in life comes from recognizing that all that stuff is bullshit.
Yeah.
And that there are no limits to like what you're capable of other than like some basic laws of physics. And then when you truly embrace that, then you can then it's just like, just pick shit off a list. Like, what are you going to do with your life?
What am I going to do next?
Yeah.
This thing about self-esteem, I just read something the other day about how people fail to remember that self-esteem is built.
Yeah.
Like it has to be constructed.
100%.
You're not just born
and
with
slowly through like small, like little
but
slivers.
you have to construct it. And one of the problems, I'm not a parent, so let me speak on parenting. Let me give some parenting advice to all the parents out there. But I was just watching an interview and the guy was saying that failing to recognize how self-esteem is built, which is through going through conflicts without help and handling them yourself. And that's one of the things everyone's robbing their kids of.
Dude, I get in a fight with my in-laws and my wife all the time because my kid will be failing at something and they go to jump in. I'm like, step.
Yeah.
Oh, but she's upset. I don't care.
Yeah.
I do not care. She's not, is she dying?
Yeah.
No. Then to let her go through whatever it is that she's going through because she needs to realize that she's capable of bringing herself through that. And if we rob her of those opportunities, she's never going to develop that awareness.
Right. I don't know what it is, but I'm very thankful that my parents left me to fail repeatedly. And I think about some of the stuff I did as a kid and I wonder, how it how it affects you later in life.
Right.
I remember like I said, I used to ride freestyle BMX when I was a kid in the 80s, right? But I remember spending like 3 hours in the garage just working on one trick over and over and over. And I remember coming in the house and having like blood all over my hands and my knees. Yeah. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm just trying to get this one trick. She's like, you've been out there for like hours. Yeah. But then like, I remember pulling off the trick.
Yeah.
And just thinking, oh, okay. So like at a very young age, I was, like 3 hours of falling on my face results in this incredible feeling of victory from something that no one else cares about, but it's just for me.
Yep.
And my mom's mad at me, even though I'm ecstatic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's something about just letting your kid go fall on their face for hours unsupervised and let them figure it out,
100%, man.
And
100%.
I'm really glad I was left. I definitely wasn't helicopter parented.
My kid came home with blisters on her hands from the monkey bars about 6 months ago, and it's like the proudest moment I've had as a father. I'm like, so you kept going on those monkey bars until you got blisters on your hand.
Right.
And then kept going. And she's like, yeah. I was like, high five, kid.
There you go.
That's what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, you remember
are my
those.
offspring. Let's
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
Let's go.
You want to see that.
Yeah, 100%. Everybody else is like, what do you do? And I'm like, no, like that's blisters heal, man.
Yeah, yeah.
But in her mind now, that loop is connected.
Right.
Like effort brings reward.
Yeah.
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 And now it's just a matter of like, what effort do you want to exert and what reward do you want for it at the end dictates the amount of sacrifice required.
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. So one of the things that I think is most beneficial is that you don't have to do, one of the benefits I think of this explosion in online coaching is that from a behavioral science perspective and the commitment device perspective, because an old school nutritionist, you weren't sending in pics and commenting on strength and all this kind of stuff. And I think you don't have to be prepping for a show to take advantage of an online coach. And what I like about bodybuilding coaches specifically is I think they're probably the most expert individuals at body transformation.
Right.
So for those individuals, and I think this goes true for hunting, if you got a sheep hump coming up in 6 months and you want to lose 20 pounds but stay strong, because a traditional nutritionist might help you lose 20 pounds, but I guarantee you're going to be losing some lean tissue at the same time. What are the types of things people should look for, and where should they be looking to find a coach if they're looking to make a change?
Well, I always say, results.
Right.
Sometimes I think the more marketing is involved, the less personal the experience is probably going to be.
Right.
And I definitely don't think big name equals successful at all. You know what I mean? That's definitely not the case. It's very possible that there's someone in their local gym that is more than enough sensible coach for them.
Yep.
That's the thing, is there's a lot of great coaches. No one knows their name. They're just local people helping out local people at their gym. They're great at what they do. They don't have big Instagrams. They're not trying to diet pros.
Well, not to be a dick, but Ditto was with a lot of dudes and didn't go pro a lot of times.
Right.
Just saying.
Right.
And he went pro this year.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
Little right time, right place. Do you know what I mean? But
yeah.
I mean,
it was good to get the win there. And there wasn't, it was just, I think some people do really well with someone local. Right. That's, first of all, some people really need someone local. They really want to see them occasionally, even. So that might be what they have to do. But I would ask around, like, you want a veteran with experience, and you want, someone that can get results. Yeah. Those are the things that I think matter. Book smart's great. Yeah. Experience is great. A little bit of both is fantastic. Ask around. There's a lot of coaches I would never recommend because I don't agree with them on enough things.
Right.
But that doesn't mean they don't get results.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean
there's a lot of good guys out there. And I would second to not going for the giant names because they're probably not going to be the one coaching you anyways.
Right.
Like I remember, Mountain Dog. Why am I gapping on John Meadows?
Yeah.
I really liked the look he got with guys, and I liked his philosophy, and I bought some of his training programs, and I even messaged him on IG, do you do non-pros? He's like, yeah. And then once I started listening to a couple podcasts, I was like, oh, John's not going to be coaching me. Like, I'm just going to be one of the dudes who's under John is going to be the one who's looking at my pictures. And that kind of changed things for me because you wanted a bit of that
relationship. Yeah, there is a coaching system that has evolved now because of how big some of they're coaching companies now.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. And some of them have a bunch of great coaches working underneath them too.
Yep.
But it just depends on the experience you're looking for.
Yeah.
I
like the results things. The reason I chose Dom, so Ditto coached me for a long time, and then COVID hit and we just took a break. And the only thing that happened with Ditto is that we became friends. Right. And I'm like a hardcore alpha personality. Right. And I'm like, I like friends, but I almost need a little bit of anxiety about my coach. Right. I want to be a little bit scared that he's like mad at me.
I think this guy fucking hates me.
Yeah. Right. Like I want that, like, a sense of approval or what do I got to do to get this guy's.
Right.
And so when I did decide to go back out on the market and look for a coach, I'd heard Dom on Fuad's podcast and I just went through his Instagram and I was like, every single guy this dude preps is like disgusting. Like they all had a look.
Yeah.
And it was that grainy, inside out, emaciated. And I'm like, that's what I want to look like, man.
Right. Plus,
And other dudes have other looks. Like you might want to be the more rounder, fuller guy or whatever. Like I think, but looking at what their guys look like and not one or two cherry picked photos. I mean, you can go to Dom's
consistent,
Instagram
over
and
and
there's
over.
150 dudes.
Also, too, I mean, look at who associates themselves with Dom.
Yeah.
You got Flex Lewis,
100%.
who's like one of the classiest guys in the entire industry and a straight up good person. So you kind of like look at who's their circle,
Yeah.
And when it just gets better and better, you get results, and this guy seems like a good dude, and all that stuff, highly recommended, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it'd be a good pick. He's a good guy. So.
And but I think it's important too. I know there's dudes who would like not like Dom can be pretty like cold if that like he's not a dick by any stretch of the imagination.
No,
but if you're looking for like a warm fuzzy hug,
Yeah.
not your guy.
No.
So I think that's important too. And if that's something that is important to you, then get it out right away. Like, listen, I'm gonna want like regular updates, and I'm gonna want to ask lots of questions, or I'm gonna want a lot of explanations. Because some dudes, that's what their business model is, and they love teaching and they love having more personal relationships, but that's not everybody.
Yep, definitely. Big spectrum.
100%.
Also, some guys just coach diet. Other people coach training only. Some people
That's a great point.
Like, what do you need? Do you need help with both? That sort of thing.
I'm even considering using someone else for my off season next year. Simply because I've been lifting the same way for a long time, and Dom doesn't do training. He can provide you some tips, but he's a high volume guy.
Yeah.
And I'm 43. It just doesn't work well,
Right.
for me. And I've been considering doing just like a completely different system for an off season. Because, and just trying, because there's also, you learn from different people, and having the opportunity to go to somebody else and learn some new tricks. Like, I think that's a very valid, point as well.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to get the job done, and the older you get, you do have to look at alternative ways to make this last.
Yeah.
You got to have more tools than just a hammer. You have more tools than just a saw.
Totally.
Yeah.
So selfishly, what are some of the most common mistakes you see dudes making in their first couple shows?
Most people don't realize, most people think they're bigger than they are and don't realize how fat they actually are.
Right.
So they expect to come in, a lot bigger than they do. They might think, I'm going to be shredded at 195, and they wind up 180.
Right.
And they're heartbroken and they think something went wrong. Nothing went wrong. That's how big you are.
Right.
That's how low you have to get really conditioned. I know that, the calipers might have told you were 12%, but there's a bit of leeway on how accurate those are. And by the time you looked good, you were 180. You know what I mean? That's just the reality of it. So a lot of people aren't ready for that. Another thing is, there's a lot of people thinking they can, just spend more on supplements and spend more on drugs and all this stuff, and they can somehow get things to happen faster. But there's no match for time. Like, no match for time. If you don't have, X number of years in building a foundation, then you're probably not going to have the muscle when you die down. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, yeah, just, a little bit too high expectations. However, just because it's your first show doesn't mean you can't be peeled.
Right.
That's one thing. So just focus on conditioning, I think, is something that a lot of young guys or guys doing their first show, they don't do enough of, is just focus on conditioning. Yeah.
And what about the presentation component? Would you have any words of advice? Do you think most guys pose enough?
Great question. I am often beside myself at how unprepared some people are to be on stage when it comes to posing.
Right.
I remember, I went and saw Dorian do a seminar in 93. So I was way before I competed, right? He had just won the Olympia for the second time. So he guest posed and did a seminar. And I remember he said, the show is won and lost with the mandatories. If you can't hit the mandatories perfectly and hold yourself on stage with poise and keep your abdomen in check and do your quarter turns properly and all that stuff, then it doesn't matter how fancy your posing routine is, and doesn't matter what poses you can do or how many lunging artistic shots. It doesn't matter because you didn't win in the mandatories, and that's where they judge you, right? So I remember just being obsessed with having like robotic and perfect mandatories and quarter turns.
Yep.
And so I always practiced the shit out of those. And, back in those days, I would set up a video camera and I would plug it into my TV.
Okay.
Right? So I'd stand in front of my video camera and my TV was like the mirror.
Yeah.
Like I could see myself in my TV and I would do all my poses. And then obviously I'd watch it to see the back shots.
Yep.
I'd watch the video back. And that's how I practiced my posing, was with a video camera and not a mirror. Because I had to see the back shots,
Yep.
And that was just how I had to set up for my first show. But I was practicing a lot. I recommend posing coaches now to people all the time because I don't have the time to, and obviously at long distance, I don't have the resources or the time to teach everyone how to pose. And some people are coming at you completely from scratch.
Dude, it's so much work, man.
Like they've got way more physique than they have posing ability.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. So I send them to posing coaches because that's a whole nother, like from the ground up, you got to start building good habits.
I think the other thing that's been a benefit, because I'm using Chris Parker.
Oh, yes. That's who I send a lot of people to.
He's the best, man. And he's been where Dom doesn't really do that, like, this is what it's going to be like, and you're going to go on stage. He's been, and the dude was like the head coach for BC.
Yeah, he was a fantastic judge.
If anybody can tell me what a BC regional show is going to be like, how they're going to call you out, and building that expectation in your mind of how things are going to go, he's been definitely fulfilling that, like more like supportive, nurturing, like, how you doing this week,
he's
man?
great with
Are
that
you
stuff.
Okay? You know what I mean? Like,
he judged me at nationals for many years.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's a great guy, man.
Yeah.
And super reasonable as far as the pricing goes and easy to get along with. And I don't think I realized how much work there was to be done.
Yeah.
Like I've been meeting with him since 18 weeks out, once a week. You know what I mean? And I still feel like shit. Better now than 18 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I'll be good to go by the time we step on stage. But like there's things to work on. Because you think to yourself, what could there be? You just strike a pose.
No.
And it's like, no, man. It's like your elbows and your arms back and open your wrists and close this. And
you got to stay on your quads the whole time. They got to stay tight the whole time.
And for me, what really cemented it was how Nick Walker dominated the Arnold.
Right.
Like it was a blowout.
It's perfect posing.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
Didn't budge, didn't shake, didn't move,
Didn't breathe
got
through
into
his
it
abdomen,
before anybody else,
held the
left
pose
it
the longest.
after everybody.
Yeah.
And it was like you couldn't not look at the guy.
Yeah.
And it was like, for me, I you've watched way more, but that was and that again, he's not the most artistic guy.
No.
He's not going to have these flowy posing routines. But if you want to talk about smoking your mandatories, that's what you do.
Well, I always tell everyone, be the first one in and last one out.
Right.
So the whole point of doing your poses in the mandatory round beside the other competitors is so they can compare you.
Right.
So if you're in first and you hold it perfectly and you hold it the longest, then they get the best look at you and they can check every guy off the list and come back to you. Okay, better than that guy, he's better than that guy, he's better than that guy, he's better than that guy. And they can keep coming back to you and they can, he wins the back double. Okay, back lat spread. Okay, he's got that, he's got that. And the other guys might have that second where they're not posing or they're breathing through their gut or they're not quite in it yet or they don't have their glutes flexed or they haven't pulled down on the abs yet or whatever. And when they do the comparison, you win.
Yeah.
That's literally all those little mathematical roulette balls of when are they looking at you and when are they not looking at you. And the judges, their eyes are dancing around the stage like this. And if you're perfect every time their eyes come across you and you're always flexing your legs and your abs are always tight and you're always positioned perfect, they can't help it.
Yeah.
And
I know for myself, I underestimated the cardio that it required.
Yeah.
And I'm a guy who hypes around mountains, but I also believe in sport-specific conditioning. Mm-hmm. Like just because you're good at one thing or have cardio in one thing doesn't mean you're going to be good at another thing or have cardio in another thing. And I think, again, that's something that only time, there's no shortcut to cardio posing. Like you just have to pose the shit out of everything again and again and again.
I remember specifically in 2007, there was 33 super heavyweights at the show that year. And I remember the first call out, there's 5 of us, but the top 2 were me and Ben Pekulski.
Okay.
And I happened to win the class that year. So Ben got second, I got first, but
that's a legit win. Ben's no joke.
Yeah, but we swapped places 3 times. The judges moved me out of the middle and him in the middle.
Okay.
And then they moved me back, and then they moved him back.
So they're just grinding you guys.
And then they moved me back. Like we must have done, I think we did 10 full rounds between the 5 guys. Like we did 10 full rounds. They moved us 4 times. And I knew it was between me and Ben because I could see the judge's eyes going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right?
Yeah.
And also the stage is so hot because of the lights. It's crazy how much hotter it is than people realize.
Right.
And we're all walking off stage, and the top 5, and we're fucked. Like we all have this look in our eyes. We're looking at each other as we're walking off the stage like, holy shit. Like there's almost a brotherhood in how much we just got worked.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we're like almost high-fiving each other like, holy fuck, they just tried to kill us, right? And I remember specifically saying to the group as we were walking off, I was like, man, it's surprising how much harder it is than when you're in your basement with a fan on you and a cold can of Diet Coke and your girlfriend telling you how good you look.
Right.
Right? You can do so many rounds in a row down there with that fan and that cold Diet Coke and the little cheering section. But when you're up under those hot lights and you're thirsty as fuck and you haven't drank anything since the night before, and it's a much worse experience.
Totally. Yeah. That's so funny. I used to compete as a DJ in like turntablism and scratch competitions and stuff. And I would, in the wintertime.
Whoa. What was your DJ name?
Grasp the Arrow.
Grasp the Arrow.
Grasp the Arrow.
Grasp
spelled
the Arrow.
ERRO. So arrow is Latin for like a vagabond or a wanderer. So there's 3 different names. There are meanings for the name. One, he's a character. His name's Grasp, and he's the wanderer.
Right.
And he just trips around and plays music and shit.
Okay.
The second one is like the phonetic explanation, grasp the arrow.
Right.
Like carpe diem.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Grasp the arrow as it flies by, seize the day. And then the third one is like grasp the arrow as in the concept or the point. Get the point. Understand the concept. This is all like super pretentious university shit.
That's cool.
What I mean? Yeah.
Okay.
But I used to practice.
I needed the insight.
Yeah, of course. And it's still my email address, and I give it to people on the phone. I'm like, I gotta
spell it for him and explain it.
Well, like grasp the arrow, what's that? I'm like, oh fuck, here we go.
Here we go.
I'm 43. I'm still explaining this.
Well, when I used to DJ,
yeah. But I used to practice with my windows open in my studio apartment in the wintertime because my fingers would go numb. And I told myself that if I could perform at a competition level with numb fingers, then when I got in front of the crowd and the adrenaline hit and my fingers would go numb anyways because you get so intense with adrenaline.
Wow.
So I would simulate that experience by just freezing my hands.
That's funny.
And I think the same thing, like I'm really lucky I have all this shit down in here. So every morning when I do my posing practice, it looks like a fucking stage.
That's awesome.
But I do think like replicating the environment you're going to compete in as closely as, because there's something, and I used to get this competing at jiu-jitsu all the time. Like if it's your first time stepping on mats at a jiu-jitsu competition, you're already kind of 2 steps behind if the other guy's competed before because he feels comfortable, he feels at home, he's relaxed, he's focused, and you're like looking up into the crowd and looking over here and like you're only 70% in the fight anyways. So you better be really better than him if you expect to win.
Right.
But if you can get rid of all that fluff and like step in there, and that's something I'd like to think I've made a bit of a science of. It's like, how can we shortcut that process? Like, how can I make my first something feel like my 100th something?
Right.
So that if I'm 92%, how do I bring that whole 92% to the show instead of actually only being able to bring 75 because I'm burning off 15% in this other like wasted energy.
Yeah. You definitely want to replicate. It's hard to completely get it right.
Of course.
So you have to kind of just kind of hope there's enough adrenaline to just surf you through the rest, and you just think, what is my one job?
Right.
Hit my poses.
Yeah.
That's I have one job.
Listen, man, I want to respect your time. I appreciate you coming by. I got one last question that we've touched on a little bit.
Okay.
But essentially, you're a guy who took a passion and then made a career out of it.
Right.
That can be applicable to anything. Doesn't have to be fitness, doesn't have to be bodybuilding. What would you tell people, or what's the kind of advice that you would give if somebody's at that point in their life where they know they're passionate about it and they want to figure out how to make a journey out of it, like how to make it their life?
And I hope this doesn't sound like the worst. It might sound terrible, but I and I never thought of it as selling out,
Right.
but you don't ever sell out. And obviously no one came along with $1 million check. I probably would have signed that pretty quick. But I mean, there's a lot of times people sell out for little amounts of money because they think that just getting going.
Yeah. There's a credibility in it too, right?
Right. But that's what you hurt.
Yeah.
Right. Like we were talking about holding off on the right ads for your podcast.
Yes.
Hold off for the right ads. Like someone might come along, Gadget A, we're going to pay you $1,000 a month. And you're like, Gadget A is kind of a shit gadget.
Yeah.
I just can't. But you have to have that awareness from the beginning.
Okay.
I never thought that. I just naturally always someone would come along and go, hey, my supplement store would like to sponsor you. And I'd be like, oh, free stuff sounds good. I'm just a young guy. But then maybe I'm like, the one owner of that store is kind of like a bit of a sketchy dude. And I don't really want to build a relationship. I don't really know that. I think that dude's kind of into some sketchy shit or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't really, I'll just hold off. Like, I was always kind of aware that, who you associate with and all that stuff, it comes back to reflect on you eventually. And you got to kind of choose your paths and your alignments wisely. And it doesn't mean that you don't like other people or won't want them to do well. You just don't want to be involved in that project. It's not quite right for what you envision for yourself. And, because I had other companies that offered me stuff before Mutant came along, but it was like, I don't really, I'm kind of fine. I've already got clients. I don't need,
Yep.
But, so stuff like that is just like really make sure that you stay true to what, the type of path you want to take in whatever industry you're passionate about. I think that's really important. I didn't intend to do that because it's not like I had a grand plan, but I just look back and I did that a bunch of times.
Right.
And then I'm glad I did it. And I remember John Meadows talking about, playing the long game in the industry and how it really paid off for him in the long run because
there's no one more widely regarded for having integrity than that guy.
Right. So yeah, that was always really important to me. I'm sure everyone makes mistakes in their business and they make mistakes and, little projects they try and things fail and stuff. But at the end of the day, if you still have your integrity with what you're doing, there's a lot to move forward with there.
I'm going to add one quick thing just because I know you and I know more of your story than we got a chance to get into today. And I think the reason you never painted yourself into a corner where you were forced to compromise your integrity because you always made sure that like certain things were taken care of. If it wasn't bouncing or bartending or clients, like you didn't expect your passion to pay the bills right away.
Right.
And I see the young guys, there's this like romantic burn the boats. And then it's like, you're going to have to take the first shit deal that comes across the table because you never actually thought about how you were going to pay the fucking bills.
I love the burn the boats analogy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they're Viking warriors.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're 21 years old with an Instagram
you're just an
account.
idiot.
You're just like, yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah. Like I'm very lucky in that what I do, I'm successful at, which means I kind of do whatever the fuck I want in the rest of my life.
Right.
I only have that freedom because I work so hard at that other stuff.
Yeah.
And I like to remind people that like following your heart is a good idea, but like have some head in the equation because you are going to have more freedom if you make sure that those really few important things are taken care of first. And then you're not going to be forced into a corner.
Yeah. I don't know. You hear people say, follow your passion and the money will follow.
Yeah.
And, I guess I sort of accidentally did that without meaning to. I hope some more money follows. That would be very nice. Yeah. But the fact that, I'm able to I'm able to make a living for myself and do well and move ahead in the world and stuff, all because of the industry I love has just been fucking crazy.
Yeah.
I think one thing that I want to say is I wake up every day with a sense of urgency.
I like it.
That it could all be
Go
destroyed
away.
today.
Yeah.
Like, maybe fucking gym burns down.
Yep.
Well, okay, insurance will take care of all the bullshit, but it's still gone. Yeah. You got to do it again. Now you got to do it all again, right? Or for some reason, every single client just universally fires me on the same day.
Yep.
I know the odds of that are pretty slim, but I wake up every morning like this could be the day when it like all halts. You got to always stay on top of what you're doing. Like, make sure you don't leave those loose ends. You know what I mean? Like, you got to keep your shit together.
Gary Vee has this great saying that everyone has urgency for the outcome, but no urgency for the effort required to achieve it.
Right.
And I think that's what I'm hearing from you is that's like day in, day out to-do list urgency.
Yes.
And it's like, if we do that shit and if we apply direct pressure and energy to the day-to-day and the small things, the big shit down the road will take care of itself. Where I think other people are so focused on romanticizing the big shit, they realize you're not taking care of any of that small stuff that's required to get to that cool big shit.
Yeah. I'm the type of person where the second an invoice hits my desk, it bounces and is paid.
Right.
Like, I do not have a stack of unpaid invoices I have to go through. There is nothing owed to anyone ever.
Right.
I pay stuff the second I pay you before I owe you. I pay you. Like I am all about like keeping a clean slate and not having a bunch of stuff to do.
Right.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I need to be like open to this stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Not the stuff that I have to tie up.
Yeah.
You know, I got to finish that thing. You know, I hate that. I need that all eradicated. I need to burn that immediately. So I'm the type of guy that like, I'm just cleaning stuff up as fast as I can.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm going to put all this stuff in the show notes, your Instagram, the gym's Instagram, the It's Just Bodybuilding podcast links. Anything you want to promo or shout out or share before we log off?
Oh, I just, I thank you very much for the deer sausage you gave me.
Oh yeah,
that was
we didn't
amazing.
even get a chance to talk about that. I got some more before you go.
Yeah, anything you hand me, I will throw in the barbecue.
Good.
And you know, I've always been lucky as a bodybuilder to have. There's always that one wild game guy in my life. There's always been there's always had a wild game guy. You know, when I lived back in Edmonton, there's a couple guys at the gym that would occasionally some moose steaks would land or hey, I got a buck, or you know, there'd be a story and then there'd be some like sausage and there'd always be the odd delivery. And I even remember working at the bar back in the day, the odd time there'd be the odd customer to come by and give all the door guys frozen like, you know, elk steaks or whatever the fuck he had. And so, you know, that's a thing about, I don't know, maybe it's an Alberta thing, BC thing, blue collar thing, gym thing, bodybuilder thing. I don't know what it is, but I've always had a wild game guy, and you now are my wild game guy. So I'm very happy.
Perfect. I love it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, brother.